Great. All right, welcome to our April 2025 Performance Evaluation Subcommittee meeting. My name is Nicole Sting. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with Washington County and I'm filling in for our chair, Zoe, who is getting ready for Community Actions Gala tonight. I'm sure a number of you are attending or tracking that that's happening. So she's working hard with her team to get ready to hopefully bring in a lot of dollars for community action. So we're grateful to still convene. We know it's been a number of months. We're going through a few staff transitions and the Solutions Council will be updating their bylaws and potentially impacting this space. So we haven't had a lot of meetings knowing that that work is coming, but we do have some important things to get through today. Heather Skyver has joined us to talk about the system performance measures that are due to HUD. So we'll go through that presentation. I sent over a summary, though a summary that's 12 pages long isn't really a fair summary, but I did send over that summary of our system performance measures, and Heather will walk through that information today. So she'll begin in just a moment, but after her presentation, we'd love to have Katie Gentry introduce herself, as well as Tim Ellsworth. Tim, I'm going to call you out because you're here. We'll do that at the end. But we have two new managers in our homeless services division that we'd love for you to get to know. But before we dive into this, maybe just a quick round of introductions, name, organization, and I'm going to skip an icebreaker today for the sake of, I kind of already did it with the caffeine thing before we got started. So if you want to actually, we'll do that as the icebreaker. If you want to say your caffeine cutoff time, and if you don't have one, I'm going to, again, use that to my advantage. But I'll turn it over first to, oh, you're all on camera today, but I'll turn it to Heather first.
All right. Hi, everyone. Heather Scriber. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Data and Evaluation Supervisor here at Washington County. And I already shared my caffeine cutoff, but it is noon.
Great. And Heather, do you want to call on the next person?
Sure. I'll just, Carly, you're the next little box.
Hi, Carly Brandini, she, her pronouns, Quality Improvement Coordinator on the Business Operations Branch team, and I don't have a coffee cutoff time.
All right, I'll go ahead and call on folks. Tori, you're next on my little box here.
Hey, I'm Tori Fletcher. I work at Centro, use she, her pronouns, and I already shared, but I do cut off at midday so you can go to bed.
Caleb?
Hi, my name's Caleb. I do street outreach with Just Compassion. I am also in grad school at night, so I have developed a bad habit of drinking coffee in the afternoon.
Totally fair. Kiyomi, we'll go to you next.
I'm Kiyomi Arbuckle, Community Services Coordinator for the City of Hillsborough. Today I got a coffee this morning, but forgot about it, so now I'm drinking it now. Terrible idea, but here we are.
Forgetting about coffee, what a faux pas. Sean, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, I'm Sean Cardwell. I'm the Executive Director of the Forest Grove Foundation out here in Western Washington County. I do not have a caffeine cutoff time.
Chad?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Chad Stover with the City of Beaverton, and I'm actually trying to avoid caffeine altogether right now. I think things just got really overly stimulated, and drinking coffee did not help with that. So try to go for decaf.
Tim? Oh, Tim, your sound isn't working. While you work on that, I'll go to Lindsay next. Oh, Lindsay, you are probably in the car.
Sorry, no, it's fine. I got it. Hi, Lindsay Downen, she, her. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for New Narrative. I don't really have a coffee cutoff time, and I am notoriously bad about having coffee ice cream too late into the evening.
That sounds delicious. Tim, is your sound working?
Oh, you tell me, is it working now?
Yes, we've got you.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Tim Ellsworth with Washington County. I'm the new Business Operations Manager. I don't really have a coffee cutoff either. I can drink it whenever and it doesn't really impact me too much.
Thanks. There's lots of flexing on caffeine today, in both directions. Kim, do you want to say hey?
Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Kim Marshall, Project Homeless Connect, Solutions Council Chair. And I don't drink coffee because I'm pretty caffeinated enough, as most of you probably already know. So
Thanks, Kim. Martin, do you want to say hey?
Yeah, let's see if I can get off. Yep. Okay, here we go. Yeah, hi everyone. Mark Manat, administrative specialist on the strategic initiatives and relations team. So reporting to Nicole. I was chuckling myself about all the caffeine cutoff. I don't really have one, but yeah, like midday. But Chad, I feel you on giving caffeine a break. I thought caffeine didn't do too much until I tried to reset my caffeine tolerance, and like day one, it's ready to go to sleep at like 11 o'clock. So in the morning.
Well, I think being sleepy is better than being grumpy, which is my if I cut off caffeine, I'm not a great person. But enough about caffeine. We'll go ahead and dive right into the agenda and Heather, I'll turn it over to you to walk through our system performance measures.
All right. Can we go back one slide? I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to go through. We're going to go through the system performance measures, but first I'm going to start with just generally what are the system performance measures, including what are the metrics that are in them, and then I'll dive into the specific, outcomes of our system performance measures for this fiscal year, and then we'll go through a vote to approve the submission to HUD. The deadline is this Friday. So now we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so SPM is the acronym for System Performance Measures. I do have a little acronym table at the end of the presentation and also at the end of the PDF that Nicole sent over earlier today. So if you're trying to remember what all these acronyms are at the end, you can go back and reference them. So the System Performance Measures are one of the 4 annually required HUD reports. This is required from the McKinney-Vento Act that does all the COC funding, and it includes performance outcomes for pretty much all projects provided in our continuum of care. The only exclusion is victim service providers, which is very, very small in our continuum. And what it's looking to measure is our response as a coordinated system of care and basically a coordinated system of homeless services, our progress in preventing and ending homelessness, and then performance by specific projects and project types. Next slide, please. I'm just going to go over kind of like the high level of all these measures, and then I'll go back through each measure as I'm about to present on them to go into a little bit more detail about what each of these are. But there are 7 high level metrics in the system performance measures, and then each metric has its own like sub metrics. So some of these may have like multiple components that go into them. And I'm not presenting every tiny little component that goes in. I'm just going through kind of the big ones that are the most impactful. So the first metric is the length of time that people remain homeless. And this is broken down kind of by are they in emergency shelter, are they in transitional housing, and are they in permanent housing? Metric 2 is about returns to homelessness. So when people exit homelessness, how many are coming back? This is usually measured within 6 months, 12 months, and 24 months. Metric 3 is the annual number of homeless persons as measured by those who are staying in our shelters during the fiscal year. Metric 4 is about employment growth and income growth for homeless persons. This one's actually a really, really small slice of our system because it is only for people who are in our COC funded projects. So this is our COC rapid rehousing projects and our shelter plus care projects. Next slide. Metric 5 is about the number of people who are becoming homeless for the first time. And this is technically the first time in the last 2 years as measured by whether or not they've had a program entry in the last 2 years. Metric 6, I am putting it on here so you guys know that I'm not skipping a number, but it is not relevant to our COC. This is only a requirement for high performance COCs. And this is about homelessness prevention and housing placement for those who are at risk of homelessness. Then the last metric is metric 7, and this looks at successful placement into housing or retaining people into housing. So placement from street outreach or emergency shelter, or people who are retaining their housing once they're in permanent housing. So before I go into a little bit about what these metrics are actually telling us and our performance on those metrics, I also want to call out a few kind of key factors that we should think about, and I didn't put this on a slide, but I'll just kind of mention them before I go in, and I'll talk about these as they impact some of our measures. But there's a few things, especially as when we're looking through these measures, I'm going to show the last 5 years of data, and you'll see that there's some specific trends in our data. And there's a couple big things that have impacted our trends and our data over the last few years. So one is we've had a huge increase in data entry and data quality over the last 3 to 4 years. We've had, a significant increase in the number of users in our system. We've implemented our data quality plan. We've implemented the quality assurance program. Our staff in Washington County has increased the number of system administrators that we have. With just our oversight of data quality and data quality management has vastly increased, which just kind of increases one, the quality of those metrics and kind of the accuracy of these metrics, but also in some ways it does impact the performance of these measures. In some cases it has made our performance maybe look worse because we're actually getting better at recording the data. Not so much for this fiscal year, but that's something that we've seen in the past. Another factor has been the increase in programs and services. So the last 4 years have been a period of extremely rapid growth in our continuum. And so you'll see that as we're looking through the history, that impact that it's had on our system. But then you'll start to notice in this fiscal year in particular, the slowdown. We haven't completely leveled off yet, but we did start to slow down the growth in this fiscal year. For this particular system performance measures, and you can kind of start to see how that's impacting our measures. Similar for our shelter system, that's a big one. You'll see a huge change in some of our shelter performance measures. It's related to that rapid growth and then that leveling off. And then the final piece is we've had a pretty big focus on street outreach in the last few years, and that is both on just working with our street outreach teams to increase their focus on, actually performing their outreach activities with the LC3 street outreach case conferencing, and then also with data quality and making sure that they're capturing the data for those that they're working with correctly. And so that's had a huge impact on some of the data that we're seeing. Okay, so with that, we will actually start to dive in. So going first to measure 1. So, as I said, there are kind of multiple metrics, sub-metrics for each of these ones. I'm going to cover 2 of the sub-metrics for the length of time persons remain homeless. So first, we're going to go with what is called metric 1.2a, which is the length of time for persons served in emergency shelter and transitional housing. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier on in the presentation is that the reporting period is HUD's fiscal year of 2023-2024, which covers October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. So this is measuring how long people were served in emergency shelter and transitional housing programs. And so it calls us a length of time homeless metric, but it's really more of a length of stay metric and how it's actually getting calculated. So I just want to kind of call that out, that the metric name is a little bit of a misnomer here. It's really just more of how long were people staying in shelter over the course of this fiscal year. And so this is where I wanted to call out, I included on the left-hand side the number of people who were served in these programs, just to kind of get a sense of the scale of who was staying. And that's where we can see that rapid growth over several years, and then that leveling out in 2024. We've had fewer people staying in shelter because we've kind of leveled out our system capacity. And then looking at the graph on the right-hand side, that is the actual metric of our average length of time for persons served in emergency shelter and transitional housing. And this year we did see a pretty significant jump in the average length of time that people were staying in shelter. It increased from 105 days to 141 days year over year. This was a 35% increase. It has generally been increasing since 2020. And I think part of the reason for the increase in this most recent performance year is likely due to the leveling off of system capacity on the housing program side. There's been a little bit less capacity for people to move into programs, and on the housing program side, so people have been staying in shelter a little bit longer. Another thing that we'll see in a couple slides is that we also saw a pretty big influx of people experiencing homelessness for the first time in 2023. And I think that kind of led to just kind of a backlog, I guess is the best word to describe it, of people that were waiting to be placed into housing. And it's led to people staying in our shelters longer. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. All right, so this is the second submetric for metric 1. This is 1.2b, which is the average length of time persons are homeless for those that are served in emergency shelter, transitional housing, and permanent housing. So this one has a pretty big difference in the number because it includes that permanent housing. And this one has a very different way of being calculated. This one is much more like a true length of time homeless calculation versus the other metric they're looking at really just when were they in shelter. This one is actually looking at that approximate date homelessness started field, when what was populated in that field, and then how long did it take for them to move into housing. And that's when they're calculating the average length of time homeless. And so that's where you can see why the number gets much, much larger versus the shelter number, because this is including people who are in permanent housing, and also it's including a much longer period of time because people are homeless usually before they go into shelter. This one also, we can see that little bit of leveling off of, we had seen rapid growth over the first few years. And then we did see that leveling off in this most recent program year. And then we saw an increase in the length of time homeless. And one potential explanation for this increase that I am seeing is I do think that potential impact of focusing on street outreach, really focusing on getting into our encampments, really focusing on finding those that are chronically homeless and making sure that they were getting on our wait list, getting into housing programs. I think that is at least one explanation for why the length of time homeless has increased, is because we've been really, really focusing our efforts on getting to those people who have been chronically homeless. All right, metric 2. This is about, as I mentioned earlier, returns to homelessness. So this is all people who have exited to permanent housing destinations. So it's about when people are exiting from a program, selecting a permanent housing destination as the exit destination. It's the graph on the left is looking at all program exits from any program type. So from street outreach, emergency shelter, transitional housing, or permanent housing. And the PH in this one, permanent housing, is inclusive of rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, RHCMS programs, shelter plus care programs, et cetera. And that shows kind of all the people who exited is that gray bar, or the whole bar is all the people who exited. And then the gray is those who did not return within 2 years of exiting. And the blue is those who did return within 2 years of exiting. This has been increasing over the past few years. And I think this could potentially be a function of just us serving more people in general, that we've had more people in our program. So we've had more people exiting. I think it's something that we need to do a little bit more digging into. Just as a county, this is something I've wanted to do more research into, try to better understand. But that is what we're seeing. The chart on the right is a line chart that shows how this has been impacted by the actual program that they're exiting from. And this is one that I have found to be interesting because this fiscal year showed a very significant increase in those who are exiting from permanent housing who then returned to homelessness within 2 years. Within the confines of what I can pull for this measure from the system, I can't tell exactly which type of permanent housing programs most of that increase is coming from, but based off of the data that I pulled when preparing the annual report last summer for Metro, I suspect that a large portion of that is from rapid rehousing, because that was what I was seeing there. And this number really lines up with what we had pulled in the annual report. Okay, metric 3, total number of homeless persons. This one, I really don't feel like there's much to talk about here. We're going to get to our point in time count pretty soon. We're working on wrapping up that data. And so this metric is looking at our homeless count in a different way than the point in time count. It's just really sheltered homelessness. So it's limited to those that we can find in shelter. And it is an annual count. So this is just an unduplicated count of those who were in shelter at one point during the reporting period. It's very similar to the trend that I've already been talking about, that we've seen an increase and then it's starting to level off. We did see a slight decrease this year, and this is really just a function of our shelter capacity. And it's a success of our system that we've been able to build so much shelter capacity. Okay, metric 4. This one has two distinct sets of groupings of how they look at this data. So there's measures like 4.1 through 4.3, which is all about people who were in a COC funded program and were still on that COC funded program during the reporting period, at the end of the reporting period. Then the next slide, which I'll talk about more in a moment, is metrics 4.4 through 4.6. And those are people who were in a COC funded program and left that COC funded program in the reporting period. This is a really small subset of our system, as I already mentioned. For the system stairs, we're only looking at 194 people. And then within that, we're looking at really two different buckets and then one roll-up bucket. So the brown line is those who increased their earned income. So this would be from wages or things like that. And then the blue line is increase in non-employment cash income. So SSI, SSDI, things along those lines. And then, sorry, I should have specified the light blue line was the non-employment cash income. And then that darker blue line at the top is their total income. So combination of the other two lines. I think this is one metric where we likely have the most room for improvement just from improving our data collection and data quality and data accountability. I think that it's very possible that part of the reason for our decline in this metric this fiscal year is not due to actual declines in income or declines in actual increases, but more because I don't know that the data entry has been happening as consistently for this metric as it has in the past. And so I think this is something that going into next fiscal year, I would really like to see some more focus on, because I think it's something that we could definitely improve with a little bit more data oversight. And then we'll go into the system leavers. I think this is a very similar story where we're seeing decreases as well. For system leavers, we had an even smaller subset with 116 people included in this metric. And again, I think a part of the decrease is just because this is not really a metric where we have been really focusing our data quality efforts on. And I think we can improve this with just some better data quality oversight. Okay, going into metric 5, this is the number of persons who become homeless for the first time. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's really the first time as measured by not having a program entry in our system in the last 2 years. So they could technically have been homeless before, but this is the first time that they've had it in the last 2 years as recorded in our system. This is a year where we actually saw a very noticeable decline in the people who experienced it for the first time year over year. So the bright blue bar is the number experiencing homelessness for the first time, and the years 2024 is the bottom bar. So you can see from 2023 to 2024, there was a really significant reduction But I think that's might just be kind of right sizing that 2023 was actually an exception year, because you can see from 2022 to 2023, we increased from 1346 to 1740. So we actually saw a very significant increase in 2023 of those experiencing homelessness for the first time. And then in 2024, we go back down to 1324, which is much, much closer to where it was historically. I'm not entirely sure exactly what all went into 2023. This has been actually a mystery. We saw a lot of increase in like coordinated entry call volume and things like that. So, and our wait list grew significantly in the summer of 2023. And we weren't really sure what all was going into it. Kind of a suspicion that maybe COVID era funds expiring and things like that might have played into it. But it was nice to see that at least there was maybe some normalizing going on. Oh, and I forgot to specify that on the prior slide, that was people entering emergency shelter and transitional housing programs only. And then the next slide is metric 5.2, which is including those also that were enrolled into permanent housing programs. And this one also saw a very significant decline of those experiencing homelessness for the first time. Again, it looks like 2023 was an exception year, and we might be right sizing. It's also possible with this one, with the inclusion of permanent housing, we can also see that there's a really significant increase even from 2021 to 2022, that this could have actually been a function of the growth in our system, that as we started growing and we started having more housing programs, maybe more people were coming into our system because they knew that we had housing available. It could be something along those lines as well. Okay, now we are getting to metric 7. We have 3 ways to look at metric 7. So the first one that we're going to look at is focused on street outreach. So this is metric 7A.1, and this is focused on those who exit from street outreach to temporary destinations, some institutional destinations, and then any permanent housing destinations, and what % of the people who exit street outreach exit to one of those destinations. This one we saw a very significant increase year over year, and I actually had to do quite a bit of double checking, because at first I thought maybe there was something wrong with the report. It does appear to be accurate. I could verify based off of other reports that I've built as well, but this does seem to be right. And I think this gets back to one of my points earlier about the increased focus on street outreach. We've done a lot of work with our street outreach teams with LC3, and in particular, I think we've focused a lot on getting them into shelter, which counts as a temporary exit destination. And we've worked a lot with our street outreach team to make sure that they're actually exiting from their street outreach program when they went into shelter. We've noticed in the past that there was a hesitancy from the street outreach team to actually exit people when they got into shelter, because they were nervous that the person might still need their help. But we've kind of been working with our street outreach teams on things like that. And I think that's a very large portion of why this metric has gone up. We've also done a lot of cleanup of the lists as well. And so I just see this as just really a reflection of the effort that LC3 case conferencing space and our very targeted focus on outreach has had. Next slide. Okay, the next slide, now we're looking at people who are exiting from emergency shelter, transitional housing, or permanent housing programs, specifically rapid rehousing permanent housing programs, to permanent housing destinations. So these are just people who are moving into permanent housing from these temporary programs. This is a metric that's been staying really consistent, really right around that 40%. Technically, we saw a slight decrease from 40% to 38% this year, but that seems to be pretty consistent overall. And then we can move on. final one. This one is about those who are in permanent housing programs. So this would include everyone in HCMS, our project-based permanent supportive housing, shelter plus care, those programs. And are they staying in housing? So either are they staying in that specific program in their housing, or are they exiting that program into a different permanent housing situation? So we're at 96% retention. This has declined from 98% the prior 2 years, but we're still pretty high retention rate. Doing well on this one. Okay, so that is the last of the metrics. And so now I'll just open it up for just one, if you have any questions about any of the measures, but then also just generally, looking for feedback of, this information fit with your real life experiences, what you're seeing when you are working with people or with your people in your organization or people on the ground. What questions does the data raise for you? And is there any other analysis you would like to see?
And Heather, while folks are thinking about that question, we've had 2 other folks join. So just want to give space for people to do a quick hello, and then we'll do a more formal introduction of both Katie and Tim after we wrap up this discussion and then vote. But Katie, I see you've come on camera, and Megan, just a flag, I'll head to you next.
Thanks, Nicole. Nice to meet you all. I think I've met quite a few of you. Katie Gentry, Washington County, new homeless programs manager replacing Catherine Gallion, and really excited about jumping in this space as data is one of the things I nerd out on. So happy to be here and kind of working through some of these with Heather.
Thanks, Katie. And Megan, if you're in a place to say hey, I see you come off mute.
I'm here. I'm just in transit. Hi everyone. Pronouns are she, her, and the city county liaison for Southeast Washington County for Tiger, Tualatin, and Sherwood.
Thanks, Megan. And Heather, sorry, appreciate you letting me do that quick interruption. Heather, I'll turn it back over to you. Or rather, if folks have thoughts on the discussion, questions, can dive right in.
I had one thought. This is Megan. Sorry, I can't figure out how to like emoji my hand right now. Which was just on the outreach piece specifically. It resonates for me that street outreach is having successful outcomes, getting people into shelter and other placements. I think it's been a very effective strategy for us in reaching people locally and trying to resolve specific situations. And I think that's something that just like continued investment in, obviously,
Unfortunately, Megan, you're breaking up. I might come back to you in a couple minutes. Maybe your sound will get more clear, but Caleb has his hand raised. I'll turn to him in the meantime.
Hi, yeah, Caleb with Just Compassion. In terms of other things, maybe some demographic information to see if there are any demographic age, race, disability, yeah.
Noting that down.
Great. Megan, if you want to try again, I know it sounds like we might just be having some audio issues on the Zoom end. All right, I see the shout out to outreach in the chat. Thank you. And I'd be curious, particularly for the service providers in the room, on that first question, you know, in terms of ground truthing this data that Heather just walked through, is it surprising to you? Is it aligned with what you're seeing?
I would say, yeah, there's definitely been more of a focus street outreach than last year, and there's been a lot more clear communication, especially bringing stations and working with Washington County has been very helpful. So it makes sense to me that from 2023 to 2024, and I imagine 2024 to be.
Caleb, I think we understood most of that. Just to flag for you, your audio cut out at the very end. I think we might just be having some Zoom connectivity issues happening now, but understood the gist of the concerted effort from the county on street outreach is not surprising. We're seeing those results because of that concerted effort. Tori, I see you're off mute.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, I definitely think that the numbers align with what I've seen. You know, we had a big ramp up, so we were getting people into the system. We had a lot of COVID money, all those kind of good things. Then we started seeing when COVID money stopped being available, there were people facing more evictions. We have less resources. We started slowing down just as budgets start to get cut. You know, it seems to align with what our experience was at Centra.
Thanks, Tori. And just want to uplift in particular the analysis from Megan that the LC3 process that rolled out in 2023 with the governor's executive orders might be part of what we're seeing here. All right, well, I'm holding space, but I know Heather will need a motion to move this forward. So don't want to end the discussion early, but I'll hold silence for a bit longer. This is your warning to jump in. All right. Well, without a chair here, I'm going to say what the motion will be. I cannot make the motion. I cannot second the motion as staff. But if someone wants to repeat the motion that I'm about to say, and Heather, if I get it wrong, I did not write this down in advance, please let me know. But the motion be, I move to approve the system performance measures for submission to HUD.
Tori Fletcher, move to approve the measures to HUD. Sorry, didn't get it quite right, but.
Oh, it's good enough. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Caleb. All right, all those in favor, please raise your virtual hand or say yes or put yes in the chat. Okay. Kiyomi, are we great? All right. That is unanimous. Thank you so much, everyone. Our first action of 2025 is moved forward. This will be on the Solutions Council consent agenda next Thursday. So we'll have that Solutions Council vote. And in the meantime, Heather will get this into HUD to follow their posting deadlines. If you think of any follow-up conversations or questions from this, you're always welcome to reach out to either Heather or really anyone in the Homeless Services Division. We'd love to hear your insights. But appreciate you, Heather, bringing this forward. And Martin, if you wouldn't mind taking down the slides, would also just like to take a moment and formally introduce Katie and Tim. I know they said hello, but wanted to make sure you heard a little bit about their background, where they're coming from, and their kind of respectively a month and a half into the role and 2 months into the role. So still getting their feet under them, but eager to be partners with you all. So I'll turn it over to Tim. I'm just going to do you first because you are off mute.
Awesome. Well, like I mentioned, I'm Tim Ellsworth. I've been with the department as the business operations manager for about 8 weeks. I've been with Washington County since 2009, just in a couple different departments. So I'm excited to join the team and learn about housing and get going and set up sustainable long-term housing options for our region.
Unlike Tim, Katie Gentry, she, her, Washington County. I have not been with the county. I'm back new to the county, but I have my entire work history being in homeless services. So we are kind of a great yin to yang, and spent the last 9 years in Arizona, really working in homeless services, both at the government level and also the nonprofit level, but excited to be back in the Northwest, which was where I was born and raised. So excited to be back. I'm sure many of you, I've met most of you, and will continue to work with you and hopefully come see you in your spaces over the coming months.
All right. Well, that is the end of our formal agenda. The last thing I just want to plug for you all, the county is hosting a volunteer appreciation event later this month. I know Chelsea emailed out the information to this, or maybe it was BNF. Someone on staff emailed out the information. If you're able to join, I think there's just a few more days to RSVP to that. It's just a thank you to all the boards, advisory body, and other committee members that support our work in informal and formal ways. So you're all welcome to join, but be sure to RSVP if you're planning on joining. And if you have any questions, let myself, Chelsea, or BNF know. All right, anything else for the good of the order?
Thank you all.
Thanks all.